Hello and welcome to the Hoop Collective podcast. We talk about the NBA, which we're doing on Thursday afternoon. Joining me from New York City, just in from Philadelphia, where he was at the Sixers preseason finale on Wednesday night, is Tim Bontemps.
How you doing, guys?
Doing just fine. Joining us from Dallas, Texas, before he heads out on the road to start the season, is MacMahon.
Howdy, partners. Hey, did you guys hear there's a YouTube sensation by that same name, Howdy Partners? Check it out on the ESPN NBA channel.
Look at this guy. This guy's ain't going to be on our pod soon.
just
trying to get off doing his thing.
Hey, I'm a self-promotional podcast / YouTube guy. And speaking of which, did you
could have stopped? You could have stopped at
suspension?
self-promotional. Could have stopped at self-promotional.
Yeah.
Or Draymond's vacation, I mean.
We're beginning, I went back and looked. We are beginning the 6th season of the Hoop Collective.
Yes.
It was called the True Hoop Podcast before the Hoop Collective, but it was sort of a clean break there. We sort of retrofitted it, but this is the 6th season. How long have I been dealing with you jokers?
Long enough.
Yeah.
Long enough.
Listen, we got to break off and do our own thing to get our names on the damn on the
label. Clearly. Speak to your agent about that.
You're talking to him, unfortunately.
What about your technical director? Does she also double as your agent?
She has some ideas.
I bet she does.
Have you and the dog on a pod? It'll be all good.
People are used to hearing you bark.
One of the great things of the offseason, MacMahon goes to Europe to do this reporting trip.
This is the third straight week you brought this up.
I don't care. It's a great story.
It's gonna come up another 33 straight weeks, I think, in some form, pal. You just got to deal with it.
Love it. Okay, so MacMahon, you're getting ready. I think you're headed to Phoenix for opening night. Mavs, Suns.
Little Mavs, Suns, Game 7 rematch. I mean, good vibes in the Valley of the Sun. Everything going well there. Looking forward to seeing that. Well,
DeAndre Ayton has given a new interview to the Arizona Republic and said everything's back to normal.
Oh, he's actually talking to his coach. Hey, all is good. All is good.
Everything's back to normal. All the players are yelling at DeAndre. That's how they normally.
I believe in the headline. The quote was, "We talk, man," which is like, oh, that's good. I'm glad. I'm glad to hear that the coach and his starting center actually speak. That's good.
Good. Well, the starting center said that they hadn't spoken, so
it's also true.
So later on today, after we record this, Steph Curry and Draymond Green are expected to speak to the media for the first time since, I don't know if you want to say the Draymond situation in Golden State was settled. I don't know if that's the word you want to use. I know this has been talked about a lot in the last week. I'm in a bit of a head scratching comment on this or a head scratching moment. I don't understand how this went from, I'll just use Bob Myers' quote from when he first talked about this before the video was leaked. But here is what he said. These things happen. Nobody likes it. We don't condone it, but it happens. It'll take some time to move through, but we'll move through it and move forward. And I'm confident that we will. And this is what I want to point out. Again, Bob Myers, words out of his mouth, a guy I respect a lot, not his first year on the job. This isn't our first thing that's happened, our first sense of adversity. Okay, that's what Bob Myers said. The video comes out, and granted, it is a extreme, blow that Draymond hits Jordan Poole with.
Well, and it also was clear that Draymond was bullying and Draymond was, basically picked a fight. It wasn't some.
Well, again, I'm going to refer to what Bob Myers said. I don't have this quote directly in front of me. I didn't pull this one, but Bob Myers said that it was practice talk. It was talk about, my team's beating your team and you called a foul or whatever. It wasn't about contracts, that it was just typical practice banter. Again, this is what Bob Myers said. Okay. to my knowledge, maybe the Warriors players didn't see it actually happen. They, maybe Steph Curry and Iguodala and Kevon Looney didn't actually see the punch in real time, but they did have the video, right? Like the Warriors did possess the video. Like, it didn't surprise them. I don't think it should have, at least. Like I assume went back and watched what happened. I'm not saying every player did, but like when Bob Myers spoke to that and Steve Kerr spoke to that, is it fair to assume that they had seen the video, the practice video?
Bontemps, you're muted, which is glorious. So as
your
lips are flapping, we can't hear you. This is a great moment in the Hoop Collective
There you
history.
go. Given how fast Bob Myers rushed in, I think it's safe to say that he saw it in real time. I don't know who else saw it.
I'm talking about when Bob Myers, when they all spoke.
No, my point is, whether anybody went and watched it or not, Bob Myers was like the first guy in there to split those guys up. So he saw it all happen in real time, even if everybody else didn't.
And look, they were clearly in damage control mode. They obviously did not anticipate that video leaking to TMZ, and they were not under oath. It ain't their job to tell the truth. It's their job to protect their franchise.
Fair. Now we have advanced to Steve Kerr a couple of days ago saying, quote, "This is the biggest crisis we've had since I've been the coach here."
And that is a mouthful. That was a mouthful. When you consider the stuff that went down, Draymond got suspended for the little tiff with KD's departure, Clay's injuries, some of Steph's injuries, like the biggest crisis that they've had. That is a lot to say.
So I'm sorry, I don't understand how it goes from these things happen, nobody likes it, we don't condone it, but it happens. It isn't our first thing that's happened, the first sense of adversity. Two, this is the biggest crisis we've had since I've been the coach here. The release of the video seems to be, the crisis doesn't seem to be Draymond punching Jordan Poole. The crisis to me seems to be the video getting public and them having to then deal with the fallout of the video getting public. So I ask you, Tim Bontemps, as somebody who spent more time around the Warriors than myself or Mr. MacMahon, why is all of a sudden it the biggest crisis they've had?
Well, I think if you look at what Steve said, right, to MacMahon's point, if you go back to last week, clearly what the Warriors were trying to do when Bob Myers sat up there was to minimize and move on, right? They, over the past decade, have made it clear that Draymond Green is going to do what he's going to do. And they have put up with Draymond Green doing all sorts of things, whether it was going at KD, whether it was all the incidents in 2016, whether it's going at Steve Kerr in the locker room in a game in Oklahoma City, right? This is not the first time Draymond Green has done something that for normal people, you look at it and go, what the hell is going on here, right? So they clearly looked at it, said, hey, we're going to try to get into this season. We're going to move forward. We're trying to win another championship. We're trying to get Jordan Poole extended. We're dealing with Andrew Wiggins and Draymond Green having contracts potentially up next summer. All this stuff going on. They try to move forward. The video comes out. Now Jordan Poole's family sees it. Now the world sees it. Everybody sees Draymond, punching his teammate in the face. That obviously becomes a situation where they have to then manage all that stuff and manage all the relationships there. You have to deal with all the public fallout of them, as you pointed out, seemingly minimizing the fact that Draymond Green punched his teammate in the face, whatever the reasons leading up to it. But ultimately, to me, this just is an example, once again, of the Warriors looking at Draymond Green and deciding it's more worthwhile for them to have him around and deal with the baggage of everything that comes with him being around than to just get rid of him. Because if they didn't think he was necessary to them winning anymore, they would get rid of him. And I would say the reason this is the biggest crisis is this is probably the first time they really sat down and discussed, is it worth having this guy around anymore? And ultimately, with the fact that they're not suspending him, they decided that it is.
Right. For this season, at least. And and I hear people complaining about, oh, this isn't fair. How are you going to suspend him for a game for getting in an argument with KD, but not for this and that. Bobby Portis got 8 games, blah, 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 blah. It's not the Warriors' responsibility to be quote unquote fair. It's not, this isn't like a high school program where you have to, set a precedent. We hold our men to a certain, our young men to a certain standard. We're trying to develop character. No, they're trying to win a
MacMahon learned all about that in boarding school up in.
I did before that I got kicked out of a program, both a football and a basketball program in Texas before I got shipped off to boarding school. So I do have some experience with this. I was not as important to either of those programs.
Did either of those coaches say this is the biggest crisis we've faced, Mr. and Mrs. MacMahon?
No, they did not. No,
not a lot of debate about whether they needed to keep MacMahon around. It's like, we don't need to deal with this guy.
Like I said, I had a lot of similarities to Draymond, but impact on the floor was not necessarily one of them.
Well, this gets down to, go ahead.
I mean, it really does get down to this. Their mission is to win a championship. Draymond is critically important to that this season. And so they're trying to manage it and clean it up. And obviously Jordan Poole is important, but discipline and fairness, all that stuff is not relevant to what they are in the business of doing. And that is defending their 4th championship, 4 championships they probably don't have without Draymond Green.
So you guys know me, I'm all about actions over words. And
it's become our motto for the pod this summer. It's come up a lot.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I really, really appreciate it. Thank you so much for your kind acknowledgement. You
guys are sweet.
The Warriors' actions are they're not suspending him. I don't care what their words are. They're not suspending him. And they're not suspending him probably because they don't want him to miss ring night. And it's more important for them to have him out there on ring night than it is to send some sort of platitude that they are really that worried about it. So while I admire Steve Kerr and I am not in the building and in the locker room, and so I have to take what he says, to more heart, I don't want to be dismissive. I just find it hard to believe that statement is true. And when in the NBA,
the which statement? This is the biggest crisis.
Biggest crisis. Yeah, I find it hard to believe. I think that they are presenting that front because they know that they can't be flippant about, well, this just happens because of the video.
To play devil's advocate for a second, like, let's just game this out in another way. Let's say Jordan Poole goes into Bob Myers' office last week. And this, to be clear, this is all just a hypothetical. I'm not saying this happened in any way. And says, I'm not getting on the court again with Draymond Green. I don't want this guy around, or get me out of here if he's going to be around. Like, there are a lot of ways this could have gone beyond everybody's going to be on the court on Tuesday. So I agree with you in the sense that this is all a bit of theater, and the Warriors are clearly doing this, to MacMahon's point, to make sure that they have Draymond Green on board, because that's the best path they see to winning a title. But I think I could see this being a situation where this could have gone very sideways very fast if it wasn't managed in a certain way.
Yeah, I'll say this: actions over words. I agree with that, but I am curious to, once Jordan Poole finally talks, to hear what he has to say about the whole situation. We've seen his actions. Like, he looks like a dude who's going to be worth every penny of this fat contract extension he's about to sign. I mean, what, he had 15 straight point preseason and all that, but 15 straight points, has looked spectacular. The coming back after he got punched in the face and finishing the practice, doing his post-practice stuff, all that. Great. He hadn't said anything publicly, and I am curious to hear, once he finally does, how he's going to approach that.
He's in the middle of trying to secure generational wealth for his family. So I can also see why he's trying to keep a low profile. He may not, even if this hadn't happened, he may not be giving interviews between now and next week's.
Well, by the way, if we're looking at this crassly, he's certainly in even stronger negotiated position than he already was after this.
Let me ask you this: also, why? Many people have said that, but why would the Warriors have to give him more money because Draymond punched him?
Not necessarily more money, but boy, like a hypersensitive situation that if Jordan Poole wanted to really inflame or blow up, you could argue he'd be well within his rights. Doesn't hurt.
That's
I would
true.
say it's harder. I would say it's harder to go to the mattresses in a negotiation with him right now. I think if you're looking at it logically, I don't think it's going to be hard for them to fight for every penny on it.
I do think that if he doesn't extend, that there could be some lingering issues there, but I think that would have been true either way.
On the flip side, people talk about, well, Draymond pay. I assume the fine's probably the max they could. I think it's $50,000. And okay, that's it. There's no suspension. Draymond really hurt his leverage in terms of whether it's future extension discussions, or more so, I think this hurts his value in the open market. Like this.
Let me ask you about this. So Draymond is not gonna. He has said that he is probably not going to do a contract extension. He was on the record with that, I believe, on media day, or at least
he's not going to get a contract extension. That's think correct. Is the way
he's not going to receive one. But I don't want to, assume anything on either side. He has a $27 and change $1 million player option for next season. So after this year, he can opt into that, or he can opt out of it and become unrestricted. And the concept being, the reason that you want to extend him is so that he doesn't reach unrestricted free agency. That's the concept of extending any of these guys who are eligible. Do you think it's a legitimate concern for the Warriors that he's not picking up $27 million? That he's opting out and going somewhere and getting, multiple years in that range? Is that something for the Warriors to seriously be calculating as a risk? Is he leaving? Is he getting $27 million in the open market next year as a guy who, yes, is incredibly valuable defensively and has shown the ability to be a championship level player, but also a guy who can't do much in terms of shooting. He's very much, he creates shots, but he's not a shooter at all. I mean, and by the way, I've asked some agents this week and some executives what their opinion is on this, and I'll wait, but I want to hear your guys' opinion on it.
Well, and he'll be 33 years old, a guy, like you said, a unique offensive player, but obviously very limited, entering his mid 30s with, there's always been kind of, there's the good and bad of Draymond's, the chip on the shoulder, the attitude, whatever you want to call it. I don't know where that big offer is coming from. I really don't.
In 2016, Joakim Noah played 29 games for the Bulls. That summer, he signed a 4-year, $72 million contract with the Knicks.
What else happened that summer? There was the biggest cap spike in NBA history.
Yes, I mean that happened too. But also, if you just look what's coming this summer, there's a lot of teams with a lot of money this summer. Detroit, San Antonio, Charlotte, Orlando, you go down the list. We're going to be back in a market where there's a lot of money on the table for teams to spend. And I could see somebody throwing money at Draymond to have him on their team. Now, to your point, I think the question is, if you're Draymond, do you opt into $27 million and say, hey, I'm going to take this $27 million, or do you opt out and try to get 3 for 60 or, whatever, 3 for 70 or some deal like that. And I think a lot of that is going to depend on what happens over the next 6 months. If he's the guy that for large stretches of the playoffs was a problem for Golden State, and there was talk about whether they should be playing him in games against Memphis, against Dallas at times, against Boston at times, I don't know what the market will be. If he comes back and is healthy all year and doesn't have these nerve issues again and looks like a defensive player of the year candidate, which he was the first 2 months last year, maybe he does get a ton of money. So I don't think anybody's looking at this situation and saying, oh man, Draymond Green is a loose cannon. I don't know if we want him around. Like, this is not the first time he's done something. To me, it's going to be a question of what does he look like on the court this year? And then as a result of that, how much does Golden State decide they need him around? And how much does some other team decide they want to have?
That's so when I talked to folks this week, just sort of an informal asking around, what I heard, various forms of, there's going to be some teams who are like, no, absolutely not for A, B, C, D, E, but there's going to be a team or two that absolutely will decide that he wants to be there and that there will absolutely be interest in him, assuming health. This gets into what I sort of term the juice being worth the squeeze, situation in the NBA. For many players over the course of time, they are problem players. Let me just bring up a classic case of this. Jimmy Butler. We all saw in front of us last season, Jimmy Butler get into it with Eric Spoelstra, screaming at him on the bench. Spoelstra
and Udonis Haslem.
Yeah, well, firing his clipboard up in the air and screaming at him. I always knew you were crazy, right? With some F-bombs, and the two of them getting into it. Obviously, that wasn't the first time Spoelstra and Jimmy got into it, either last season or before. And I am sure that there have been times that the Heat organization has been exasperated with Jimmy Butler. But then I recall the Eastern, I don't even, there's obviously more examples than this, but let's just go back to the Eastern Conference Finals last year. 41 points in game one, 47 points on a bad knee, 9 rebounds, 8 assists, 4 steals in a flat out iconic performance in game 6 to get that thing back to Miami. He scores 35 in game 7 and has a 3-pointer in the air with 15 seconds left that might have been the biggest shot in Miami since Ray Allen had that gone down. And yeah, Jimmy Butler during the regular season gets disinterested. He likes to create conflict. He is injury prone. But my God, the juice that comes out of the squeeze at the end is pretty damn sweet.
Absolutely.
And so for a long time, as you've been saying, Bontemps, the juice on Draymond is worth the squeeze. Not only his antics in, that he has, but that he goes on, he finishes a game and runs out and does TNT. He's doing
his podcast.
Right. Of course, I didn't even get to the podcast
stuff. Yeah.
I'm sure they're not real thrilled that he's going over, that was a bit of a thing last year, whether he had revealed any strategy in his podcast during the middle of the finals. The juice is worth the squeeze. And I think what Steve Kerr, what I will take away from those comments, this is our biggest crisis, is if there's one thing I'll say is that the answer was always yes, 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 yes. Sometimes it was, yes, it's worth the squeeze. And now I don't know if everybody is saying yes.
You call it the juice being worth the squeeze. I call it the pain in the ass to production ratio. When the production doesn't justify the pain in the ass, then you've really got a problem. Draymond's career, his production has always justified whatever pain in the ass that came along with him.
Well, and if you look,
it still does ultimately, right?
Well, yeah. Well, if you look, like obviously this happens a lot with wide receivers in the NFL. That's kind of the prime example of it. But you go down through time, we've seen it with plenty of guys in the NBA. Like, there's plenty of guys who, when they're playing at the peak of their powers, you deal with a lot of stuff. And the second they're not really worth it anymore, you're throwing them out the door because you don't want to deal with it. And to me, the crisis part about Golden State and the interesting thing about this was that this felt like the first time the Warriors might actually choose, you know what? We might not actually need this guy. Now, ultimately, they decided they did. So it didn't matter.
See, they did really fast. Bob Myers, they had decided already that it was. And then all of a sudden, I don't want to go backwards.
And then maybe, it's another decision maybe next summer. And that might not only be about Draymond's production. It might be about the production of a guy like Jonathan Kuminga. Or, even Wiseman, James Wiseman, some of those young guys. Hey, can we fill some of this production?
If Wiggins is great again this year, and they're like, look, we're going to give the bag to Wiggins and move on.
That's I think the final thing we should say is that Golden State appears to be reaching their limit on what they can spend, and it does not seem like this whole group, whether including Wiseman with a big player, with a big option, which I'm sure they'll pick up for next year at least initially, but between him, Andrew Wiggins, Jordan Poole, Draymond Green, it's hard to believe all those guys are going to be on this team again next year. Now, maybe the tax rules change. Maybe they get a lot of relief that way and they can make it work. But if they're all looking for increases in pay or even the same amount of pay from where they're at, there's going to be decisions that have to be made. And that's where, for the first time, we might actually see them have to start subtracting from this group. And that's, to MacMahon's point, next summer is really going to be a pinch point for them on that.
And everyone knows it. All right. I want to talk to one of our other favorite subjects, the Lakers. The Lakers are 1-4 in the preseason. Obviously, that doesn't matter that much. There's been guys in and out of the lineup. But Anthony Davis has looked really good coming off of those injuries that he had last season, really those back-to-back injuries. He's looked great. You can tell that he did dedicate himself in the off season. The Lakers went out and signed a couple of, I don't know if they're starters,
guys.
Yeah, I mean, they signed a couple of centers that made it, Thomas Bryant is a starting NBA center, and it, made it seem like, okay, Anthony Davis is going to start at the 4. They signed Damian Jones behind
Damian Jones has taken some pretty decent steps the last couple of years. Like, those two guys are both interesting young guys. Take flyers on.
So the Lakers signed those two guys, and Anthony Davis comes to camp thinking he's going to be the power forward. If you've listened to me at all on this podcast, or I've said it on TV, I think the Lakers' strategy of building a team that doesn't have good 3-point shooting is an error. It may be a stopgap until they can find a Westbrook trade, but signing guys
as to production ratio.
That is a classic example right there. Of course, his production has also gone way down.
And the other side of that equation has not.
Right. So, but earlier, I don't know if it's last week or over the weekend, Darvin Ham in response to a question, because by the way, the Lakers have looked good when they've had basically one big on the court, and LeBron has played essentially 4. Sometimes he's technically the ball handler, but he's been the 4 and Anthony Davis has been the 5. Or the one game LeBron looked great when Anthony Davis he had a back issue and he missed a preseason game. And one of the reasons that is because the Lakers have problems generating space with the team that they have. And so AD at the 5 generates space. LeBron at the 4 generates space. And so Darvin Ham was like, he was asked about it. He was like, this is putting Anthony Davis at the 5 is under serious consideration. It might be something we have to seriously look at doing.
Would you like me to read what Anthony Davis had to say about that?
I will read it.
There you go.
I trust coach's decision. I mean, I'm pretty sure he's heard AD wants to play the 4, so he knows where I stand. But at the end of the day, I want to win. So if that's me playing the 5, that's what it's got to be. Let me just say that third person in the preseason, never good. Never good.
Is that a general rule?
That's general rule.
Especially when the third person wants something that ain't happening.
Yeah. Multiple people sent me that quote in the last from our buddy David McMenamin's Twitter account, sent me that tweet and said, this seems like a problem. And I was like, well, here we go.
Oh, by the way, that was after the game against the Wolves on Wednesday night. Whatever, the Wolves won the game. The Wolves basically, by the way, are undefeated in the preseason.
There was an all caps tweet about 4 wins in a row in the preseason from the Wolves Twitter account. It's almost like the Wolves are excited about their team.
There might be a banner soon. Banner in the arena, baby.
Well, they're going to raise the banner for winning the play-in, right? From last year. I mean, Anthony Davis was pretty
whenever
awesome.
the Lakers are there, so Pat Bev can be part of it.
Hey, listen, man. We're going to talk about the Wolves a little bit later. They love Pat Bev in Minnesota. AD, by the way, last night was 7 of 11 with 13 rebounds. He's playing pretty good. LeBron was also really good in that game, and they lost. I think that's going to happen a lot this year.
What were Russ's numbers?
Russ did not shoot the ball as well last night in that game. Let's see. I know he didn't make a 3. He played 25 minutes. He took 3 shots, 0 of 2 on 3, 5 points, 3 rebounds, 4 assists. Beverly played more minutes, and there was a moment where Beverly came in for him or he came in for Beverly, and Russ didn't look thrilled. But
there was also a moment where Pat Bev is gathering the troops, and
that's what
Ron's right there, everybody else is right there, and I mean, Russ, like, we're trying to chit chat over here, buddy, and just come on. No, take about 4 more steps over this way. Those steps never happen.
I don't want to overreact to that, but anyway,
I will.
This is Anthony Davis does not want to play center. The Lakers are better when Anthony Davis plays center. This has been the case for years. They have not addressed it. The steps that they have taken have not alleviated the problem. In fact, the roster moves. In fact, in my view, they have exacerbated the problem. And we've already got some prickly stuff happening in freaking October. Bontemps, what are we supposed to say about this?
The Lakers are going to be a mess. We've talked about it a ton. I don't know what else is there to say. They're if those 2 guys are healthy, they'll probably be okay, and they'll be somewhere in the play-in mix. And if everything breaks right, some other teams have issues. Maybe they can somehow squeak into the 6th seed, but they're going to be somewhere from 7 to 10, probably in the West, and that's what they're going to be. Barring some trade that hasn't happened, that's what they're going to be.
And an argument can be made that AD playing the 5 on a full or most time basis does reduce his odds of staying healthy. I don't know the science behind all that, but an argument can at least be made. Hey, if he's playing the 5, he's going to have to be banging more. That's tougher on the body.
Right.
Oh, he's not saying it because he's being selfish. I think he's saying it for a reason. There's structural reasons why it doesn't make sense. And look, Thomas Bryant is a guy who in limited shooting when he was with the Wizards actually showed, he had a terrible injury that knocked him out for a year, but he has shown a little bit of ability to stretch the floor. But I just don't know if you can count on it. And they just look so much better when they can put an extra shooter out there.
That's why they're still not going to be good enough, but that's why that Pacers trade, if it ever happened, would be interesting, because you'd have a center who could space the floor. You'd add one of the best shooters in the league. You'd roll those guys out there with Patrick Beverley. That's at least a functional lineup.
Yes. Floor spacing. Yes. It's the first time we've ever heard that was a good idea for LeBron. Okay. Trivia time. Bontemps. That sound has to make you smile. It's the sound of another sale on Shopify, the all-in-one commerce platform to start, run, and grow your business. Shopify gives entrepreneurs the resources once reserved for big business, so upstarts, startups, and established businesses alike can sell everywhere, synchronize online and in-person sales, and effortlessly stay informed. Scaling your business is a journey of endless possibility. Shopify has the tools and resources that make it easy for any business to succeed, from down the street to around the globe. Reach customers online and across social networks with an ever-growing suite of channel integrations and apps, including Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, Pinterest, and more. Synchronize your online and in-person sales. Gain insights as you grow with detailed reporting of conversion rates, profit margins, and beyond. More than a store, Shopify grows with you. This is Possibility, powered by Shopify. So go to shopify.com/hoop, all lowercase, for a free 14-day trial and get full access to Shopify's entire suite of features. Grow your business with Shopify today. Go to shopify.com/hoop right now. Shopify.com/hoop.
Now it's time for Hoop Collective Trivia.
So this question comes from a avid listener of the pod who will remain unnamed, who called me yesterday and talked to me about it.
And so the wake an avid listener who has your phone number. So this isn't just someone on Twitter who sent you a message.
Not a person.
What
not a
team
rando.
Does he work for?
It does not work for ESPN. Okay, that's he's right. Not random. He's not. That's it. It's not a random. That's well put. Okay,
it's not a random person. Not a random. But they called me in the wake of our conversation about Victor and Scoot last week, and had an interesting trivia question, which I've tweaked a little bit, which I'll explain in a second. So since 1960, when Oscar Robertson and Jerry West were the top 2 picks, there have been 2 drafts where the top 2 picks were the highest 2 players in win shares over the course of their career.
God, win shares. I mean,
well, it's basically
this guy's obviously very smart.
The top 2 players are the two best players in the draft.
It's the 2 best players in the draft. I had to. I'm explaining why I
you dorked it up a little bit. Yeah.
I had to tweak it a little bit for reasons I'll explain in a second. But
They ended up being the two best
So
players.
there's only been
Yes.
two. There's only been two.
only two drafts.
There's a really...
See LeBron and Darko. That's one.
Oh man. I'm
Well,
are
the number
drafts,
two
are they underwhelming drafts?
Well, the number 2 picks are the ones that are sometimes shaky. There's a lot of variance.
Yeah, they're the number 1 when it's Greg Oden.
Yes,
but there's you're thinking Darko, you're thinking Sam Bowie, you're thinking a lot of. Boy, this is a tough one.
It's a tough question.
I mean, 1960 is a long time ago, friends.
All right, I'm going to halfway cheat because we'll sit here twiddling our thumbs.
Yeah,
forever.
you can halfway cheat.
So I'm going on Basketball Reference, and I'm just scrolling the general draft pick, so I can just see like the number 1 picks.
Yep. I'll get one of them is in the 60s, and one of them is in the 90s.
Okay, the 60s. I've got.
I mean, the 60s one is 2 Hall of Famers. So.
All right, the 60s. You say 2 Hall of Famers in the 60s.
Yeah.
When was Jerry West taken?
I said it's since Jerry. It's not. That was how I opened it. It wasn't. It was Jerry West and Oscar Robertson.
Oh, that's
were
right.
Not the.
Sorry.
I was looking at it. It ain't Kareem and Neil Walk.
No.
Now I'm really cheating.
Yes.
Okay. Elvin Hayes.
That's it. Elvin Hayes and Wes Unseld.
Okay, I got one.
My God, I would be here for 6 months.
Totally cheating here.
That's fine.
And then in the 90s, I'm going to look. It's not the AI draft because Kobe was in that draft.
It's not that one.
It sure as hell ain't the Ola Wakandi draft.
Nope, it's not that one.
When did Big Country went 3rd, right? I don't think.
Wait, is it the Weber Shaq draft? I'm sorry, the Weber Penny draft.
It is not that one.
It would have been if Penny would have.
It's also not
healthy.
The reason I had to tweak this a little bit is it's not Alonzo and Shaq, which it should have been.
About to go
because PJ Brown had 1/10 of a point higher.
Okay,
than
you
Alonzo
just the whole win share.
Well, I was trying to.
You really damaged the credibility of win shares here.
Wait a minute. Did you just say that PJ Brown, great guy,
that's insanity,
had
more
higher
win shares
he did.
than Lonzo Mourning?
Yeah, that's
correct.
That's
insanity.
I mean, I can't even come.
Okay.
The reason I changed it, when this person called me, they had given me the Alonzo and Shaq draft, which by talent wise is the right one, and they also said 1981.
You should have stuck with his. You should have stuck with his trivia questions.
It just was harder because I just would have said who are the 2 best players, and it was a little more complicated. But the overall point is
it ain't Glenn Robinson, J. Kidd, is it?
No, it's 1990 with Derek Coleman and Gary Payton.
The point is for approximately 26 years.
The point of the trivia question was less for you to get it right, which I wouldn't have got this one right. It was hard. But it was more to lay out that looking through over time. Like
doesn't happen
obviously
very often.
No, and like Victor and Scoot both look like they're going to be awesome. And this guy's point was essentially we always talk about how the draft starts with the 3rd pick, the draft starts with the 4th pick, whatever. It's like we might need to think more about these picks just in general, because it's very rare that you see the top 2 players be the 2 best players. And sometimes it's because of injury, sometimes because one of them's just bad. But it is just interesting how over that length of time, it basically never happens where the top 2 picks are the 2 best guys. It's just something to think about as we go forward.
I have 14 more gray hairs in my beard after that one.
I'm still thinking about PJ Brown having a better win share than Alonzo Mourning.
Well, I was just trying to make it so it wasn't.
I'm about ready to have Kevin Pelton zoom in here to defend this.
Well, hey, after Draymond punched Jordan Poole, Pelton's got the Warriors getting Scoot Henderson with the 2nd overall pick. He dropped him a little bit further in his ranking.
I was just trying to have it so it was some sort of. Where
did Pelton have them ranked? Where did Pelton have them
in the West?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, to me, based off of injury and age.
Okay.
Also, his cable went out during the playoffs last
year. Does anybody watch James Wiseman in the preseason?
I was just trying to have it be something besides here are who I think the 2 best players are in the drafts, because that would have been a lot more random for me to answer.
Well, I
The
happen
point
to know who asked
stands.
this question, and I trust this person's judgment.
Yeah.
on who those best players were.
Yeah.
Okay. What's going on, team? What's going on in Minnesota? I had a story that came out. What?
Wendy's got a fresh visit. He's got all the Wolves.
We got self-promotion all over the place today.
I had a story that posted this week about the
very good
Timberwolves.
story. Should go read it if you haven't seen it yet. Very good story.
I spent some time up there during training camp. I'm a little bit thrice burned, fourth time shy on the Timberwolves over the years because I had gone up there. I was kind of like, I flew in and I was like, I can't believe I'm back to do another Wolves are going to be good story, because I've done this story several times.
They've got Cat, they've got Wiggins, they've got Levine.
A couple years ago, and I would just say before I tell this story, I really like Ryan Saunders, but I had, they got off to a really good start. Have I told this story in the pod before? I should stop telling it. But I went up to, they got off like a really good start. They were like 9-4 or something. And, Ryan Saunders had taken over as head coach, and he was really young. He was the youngest coach in the league. And I went up there and he was doing all these innovative things. He had a DJ during practice, and the players could give their playlists, and they would have a DJ during practice. And if the players weren't getting it done, or he wanted to say, he could turn down the music on his Apple Watch. They were doing all these things that were very sort of, fresh and new. And the story was going to be the first millennial head coach, which is what Ryan Saunders essentially was. And I went up there and I spent some time, and I remember talking to Andrew Wiggins, and I'd been interviewing Andrew Wiggins since he was a rookie, and he's a nice guy, but he wasn't always great interview. Well, he gave me this incredible interview about Ryan Saunders, about how he and Ryan both had newborn babies and how it was incredible. He never thought that he would ever be able to compare notes on babies with his head coach, and how he'd connected with his coach like he'd never connected with a coach before. And I talked to Carl, and I only remember who was on the team back then. And I wrote this really good story, and it was going to run 8 to 10 days later. And the Wolves went on a 15-game losing streak. And then they traded half the team. They traded half the team at the trade deadline, and half the guys I interviewed were not even on the team anymore. So I go to Minnesota a little bit, and then even before, I remember there was one year, Bontemps, you and I were like, oh man, they're going to win 50 games this year.
Yep. It was the year Tibbs got there with Carl and Andrew, and then they won 30 games.
Well, and then they did win the next year with Jimmy, and Jimmy saw enough in a very brief playoff appearance to basically decide he wanted to get the hell out of Dodge.
That's right.
That's right. And I went back up there to cover that story that night, where Jimmy played his first home game after his trade demand, and Tibbs got booed louder than Jimmy did. Man. Anyway, so I sort of went up there and I was like, okay, here we go again. And I'm just going to be honest with you. I'm skeptical that this Gobert trade is going to work. I recognize that they've got a lot of talent. I recognize that they're going to be good, but I'm skeptical that it's going to work when it matters, because teams are just going to attack Karl Towns.
I was going to say, are you skeptical? I was
ahead.
Just going to ask, are you skeptical of it working in regular season games or in playoff games, or both?
No, I think they'll win. I think they're going to look. I'm skeptical that they built Jazz North.
Okay, but here's my thing. Define this trade working for the Minnesota franchise that has won a playoff series 1 year out of their 33-year existence.
Well, and also to be clear, do you mean you're skeptical that they have recreated the Jazz, or that they'll be as good as the Jazz?
I'm skeptical that they've recreated the Jazz, the team that's going to be awesome in the regular season and be vulnerable in the playoffs.
That's what you think they might have done.
I think so.
I was making sure I understood what you were saying. That's
Jazz North, right. The Wolves, after January 1st last year, the Wolves had the number one offense in the league. Karl Towns and Anthony Edwards are shot creating beasts. Mm-hmm. And Chris Finch is already proven that he is an excellent offensive tactician and strategist.
Yeah.
He puts Karl Towns, even when Karl's getting double teamed, like they were. I mean, just remember that series with Memphis. It was an incredible series to watch.
Yeah.
Those two teams going at it. And so I was just very skeptical. And I don't even really care about. I mean, I care about what the price that they paid, but I'm more focused on whether it worked. And so I go up there and I spent 3 days there, and I talked to their coaches, I talked to their executives, and like they explained to me why they think it's going to work. And Chris Finch is like a real big believer in it. And like Finch admits, like, is he saying they're going to win 65 games and cruise to the title? He's not saying that. He's saying, I think this is going to make us a lot better. I think we were in 7th place last year and we didn't get out of the first round, and this is going to make us better. And on that, I have to agree. And the other thing is they looked at stuff. They were like, look, Karl Towns took 4 3-pointers a game last year. Maybe it was 5 if you want to round up, but it was 4 point something. The guy's like 43% 3-point shooter. Impossible to guard, 3-point shooting champ, one of the best big men 3-point shooters ever. He can only get up 4.
Period.
I was waiting. I was waiting. MacMahon, I could see he was ready to jump out of the screen to say that.
So
by the way,
he.
J
So is
Kid,
Karl.
J Kid mentioned that the other day too.
Yeah. So, you know, and they were like, look, he's only getting up 4 a game. Like, he was getting double teamed relentlessly at times. Like, there were guys we were playing that they weren't guarding. So like, if he can get up like 7 a game, or my God, occasionally get up 10 or 12 a game, just think how much better that would be for us. You know, they talked about how they can stagger, where they can now have either Gobert or Karl on the court for all 48 minutes. They talked about how D'Angelo Russell, who's in the last year of his contract, how he has never had a really great pick and roll partner that would work as well as Rudy did. And so I think their plan is they're going to really try to keep Russell and Gobert together on the court.
Yeah.
And then they're going to have Ant and Towns, who were, as I said, shot creating beasts together.
Yeah.
And like, they have Sachin Gupta, who's like one of the analytics innovators in the NBA, who ran all the numbers and found out, you know, all these different ways he thinks Gobert is going to help. And like, these guys are totally all in, and they're smart guys. Chris Finch is a smart guy. Tim Connolly is a smart guy. Sachin Gupta is a smart guy. Like, they did not do this like flippantly, like, oh, we can get Rudy Gobert, cool, let's get him. Like, they really put in the time. And I mean, it's not, their point is, there's only so many chances you get at trading for a star player. We got a star player without giving up any of our stars. We felt like we had to do it. So
Pat Bev would say, what do you mean you didn't give up any of your stars? You gave me up. What are you talking about?
That's
dude?
the funny thing. When I talked to the players, I wanted to talk to all the guys who were there the previous year. Those guys were stunned at the trade, man. Like, one guy I talked to, Jordan McLaughlin, who's their backup point guard. He's his 4th year with the team. And he's like, we were like, oh man, we're going to run it back. Torian Prince was like, he was like, the group chat was like, really like, what's going on? I think all of them loved Pat Bev. I talked to Jaden McDaniels, like, they all loved Pat Bev. But again, the Wolves were like, hey, 7th place was great. We'd love to finish 2nd. We'd love to finish 3rd. And looks, whatever you want to say about the Jazz with Rudy, 2 years ago, they had the number 1 seed. They had a top 5 offense and a top 5 defense one year. And by the way, the Wolves weren't even that bad defensively. I think they finished like 13th defensively last year. They just couldn't rebound when it mattered. And they had trouble.
And the 13
was
the 13 was a very fortunate 13th. There was a lot of luck involved. They were one of the worst rim protecting teams in the league. Their biggest weaknesses were they were terrible at rim protection. They were terrible at rebounding. Gobert, obviously, if you're trying to address those 2 needs, that's the dude to address them. And
he led the league in rebounding last year.
Led the league in rebounding. And obviously, he's one of the great rim protectors in NBA history. I do think it makes them better. I guess the question is, how much better does it need to make them to justify giving up all those picks that would be, that you could use to build during Anthony Edwards' prime that isn't for several years? I think we all agree that if Anthony Edwards isn't their best player now, he will be soon. Certainly, I think he's the guy who's going to determine the ceiling of that team. And again, we've talked about the development of Jaden McDaniels. McDaniels is kind of their fifth starter, but I think his development is going to be critical to determining how good they can be this year.
Now, look, you said it before, McMahon. The Minnesota Timberwolves have made the playoffs twice without Kevin Garnett. They've won a playoff series once in one season in their entire history when they got to the conference finals in 2004. Like, this is a team that generally has been an absolute dumpster fire. If they could be the Utah Jazz over the last 6 years for the next 6 years and win a playoff series in 3 years and be one of the top 4 seeds on a regular basis, I think they would sign up for that in a heartbeat. And it's part of what the motivation was clearly to make this trade, is they want to build on this brief success they had last year and actually, take a bunch of middling players to get. I mean, look, people like to bag on Rudy Gobert for various things, most of them unfair. This guy has been consistently one of the 10 best regular season players in the NBA for the past 5 or 6 years. If you have him on your team, if you're guaranteed, look, you're guaranteed to have.
He's a win shares guy.
Look, you're guaranteed to have an
he's
elite
no PJ Brown.
Win shares. He's like one of the 3 best.
Well, listen, I said regular season for a reason, because you look at what's happened in the playoffs. And while I think some of the criticisms of him have been unfair because Utah maximized their team to have a bunch of offense around him because of how good he is on defense, he still is a guy that is going to be limited in space. He's limited switching around on guys. We've seen in the playoffs that could potentially be something that's an issue when teams play small.
I think his offensive limitations have been the bigger problem in the playoffs, and in the fact that he wasn't capable of guarding 5 guys at one time. Like if you're playing 5 out, he can't get to his man in the corner and clean up, your terrible perimeter defense by the other 4 guys.
That's right. And now, I think,
hey, how much is he going to have to clean up if he's closing games, or when he's closing games with Karl Anthony Towns and D'Angelo Russell? Like, there might be some of that too.
That is true.
McDaniels might have to help out a lot with that.
That is true. But with Jaden McDaniels and Anthony Edwards, I do think the baseline for Minnesota defensively is higher. And at least with Karl out there, at least they have 2 guys who can get a bunch of rebounds. And in theory, that will help too, because part of Utah's issue is also they were playing so small that they have trouble on the board sometimes too in those spots. So I think they've got a chance to be a big time regular season team. I think they're going to be a better version of the regular season of Utah, to your point, Brian. But I don't think any of us could sit here and say we know how it's going to look in the playoffs, because we just haven't really seen a lineup like this, work in a long time, and really be tried. Like, you could argue the Celtics did something like this last year, but Al Horford and Robert Williams are way more mobile and able to do a lot more things. That Celtics team is way more versatile than this Wolves team is going to be. They're going to have to do one thing and do it really well, and we'll see if it's good enough.
Well, you just hit on something there interesting. I know we got to wrap up, but Robert Williams or Rudy Gobert in the playoffs. Robert Williams is almost the quintessential modern big man to have in the postseason because of the ground he can cover. He can play stretch players.
Rudy Gobert playing on the Celtics would look pretty good too, I think.
Well,
he'd be pretty good. But it'd be pretty impossible to score on that team if you had him surrounded by Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown, Marcus Smart, and name your other player. I mean, I
think we can have an Al Horford or Karl Anthony Towns in the playoffs discussion.
Yeah, I mean,
not talent. I'm saying, which guy can you win playoff series?
Well,
with?
Karl's postseason resume, while short, is checkered.
Well, look,
that's a polite way to put it.
I mean, listen, this trade, to me, the thing that hasn't been talked about enough about this trade is, to me, it's a bet on Karl Towns as much as anything. It's like,
yes, of course. See, they're doing it to help Karl, and they're doing it to free up Karl. It's a bet on Anthony Edwards. It's a bet on Anthony Edwards that Anthony Edwards is going to be like a superstar level player, and that you go get a guy right now. To me, the Cavs trade for Donovan is a bet on Evan Mobley, and the Wolves trade is a bet on Anthony Edwards. Although schematically, you are correct.
Yeah,
it affects Karl Towns more.
I agree with that. It's more to your point about what they think they can do with Karl offensively. Like, you make this trade because you think Karl Towns could be one of the 3 best offensive players in the league. Because obviously his defense is going to be an issue, but you're basically saying all the issues you have on defense were taken away. You've got to be right there with Steph and those kind of guys on offense for us to get where we want to go.
Well,
I'm not saying he's going to do that.
His defense is less of an issue if he's playing the 4 closing games than it is if he's playing the 5.
Well, I'll just take I'll leave with this. When I was talking to Chris Finch, and it was the first time I'd ever really talked to him at length, and I really enjoyed the conversation I had with him. Also, he's an Ohio State football fan. He's got.
No wonder you enjoyed it.
Yeah, we were talking about how nobody covers Cade Stover. He should be tight. In tight end. So
our listenership just went off a cliff. Just turned it off.
Let's talk about CJ Stroud's downfield passing ability. The thing that he said, we were talking about. So when they were about ready to make the trade, Tim Connolly, the team president, who got a $40 million contract to be hired away from the Nuggets,
it's DeAndre Jordan money.
he said, look, if the other teams go smaller, you're going to stick with it. If we're going to make this trade, is this something that you're going to stick with? And what Finch said in the room, what he said to me is both a philosophy and a vote of confidence in Karl Towns. He said, when you have Karl Towns, you do not play small. And what they are basically saying is they think that the weapon that Karl Towns is offensively is more of a plus than what happens to him defensively is a minus. Mm-hmm. And so that's what they're putting the chips on.
Yeah.
And I do think they're going to be really good, though. I do think they really are.
I think between now and late April, they're going to be awesome and it's super fun to watch. And like Philly, I'm genuinely don't know what it's going to look like after that, but I'm really curious to see.
Yeah. I don't even know what their over under is for wins.
48.5. I would hammer the over on that person.
Yeah, I'd take the over there.
Yeah. Assuming, some level of health there. So a
but
little bit worried.
Would you take the over on 3.5 wins for them in the playoffs? That's the question.
That's going to be, to me, matchup dependent.
Yeah. I agree. Matchup dependent.
The playoffs, we haven't even started the season yet, but if these teams are healthy, I just think the playoffs got a chance to be unbelievable next year. There's a lot of good teams
during the season. Like Bontemps, your schedule over the next week, like there's going to be so many great matchups during the season because these teams. Just tell everybody what your schedule is for the first week of the season.
So the first week of the season, I'm going to open up at Sixers Celtics in Boston on opening night before Draymond gets to trot out after his spa days are over. And then I'm doing Cavs Raptors in Toronto on Wednesday.
You can get into Canada?
I can. Two very interesting teams. Obviously, curious to see where they end up.
A low-key big game. Cavs Raptors out of the game.
It will be very interesting.
I hope Mobley's ready to go. Mobley's got a bum ankle.
Yeah, hopefully. Like to see him at Scotty Barnes. Then Sixers Bucks on Thursday. Celtics Heat Eastern Conference Finals rematch on ESPN on Friday, and then Heat Raptors twice over the weekend. They do one of the baseball series there. So that's going to be the Eastern Conference on a nightly basis. There's going to be at least one of these games or two.
3 games in Miami there, MacMahon. How about that for an October road trip for the old Bontemps?
It'd be a little better if it was in January, but
it's a tough life for him. I tell you what.
But that's going to be the East on a daily basis.
Honey, I got to go to South Beach. Yeah, these just grinding me away.
It'll be tough, but there's 6 or 7 really good teams, and every night, like, there's a good chance at least 2 of them are playing. And the West is the same way. Like, big man, you're going to Mavs Suns opening night. Like, there's
Suns. I got Mavs Grizzlies next week. I am actually gonna, because it's an easy trip and I'm curious. I am gonna pop up on Sunday to check out those fighting Timberwolves, and in OKC. I mean, South Beach, Bricktown,
Yeah, like you got. We haven't talked about teams like New Orleans and Brooklyn, and I mean, there's just a lot of. I'm just really excited for the season. I think it's going to be really fun. I can just hear
Bontemps' wife. You're still in Miami? Yeah. I'm here to see the Raptors play the Heat. Wait a minute. Raptors, you were at the Raptors Heat game yesterday. Oh, no, there's another one. What do you mean?
And no, they're on FaceTime, and Bontemps has that little hat that he wore on SportsCenter last year.
Yes,
the one that him and Friedel wore when they're smoking cigars.
We just saw Friedel the other day on a rare visit to New York, and I was asking him where his Calle Ocho his Ocho size Calle Ocho hat.
That was where they let everybody at the table sit on regular size chairs, and then they gave Bontemps like a kiddie chair.
That's correct. It was an interesting experience.
Oh man! All right, thank you for listening to the Hoop Collective podcast. We will talk to you next week. The season gets going. We're soon to up the number of pods that we have per week, and I'll let you know more about that. Thank you for listening to our 6th season, and stick with us all year long. We'll talk to you soon.
Adios, amigos.